Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I'm Rishikesh. So today's topic that we have is the big data applications on AWS. So we will be discussing what are the different AWS applications, big data related applications we have on AWS. Let's have a look at the agenda now. We will begin with understanding what big data is basically, and then we will take a brief overview of what AWS stands for. Many of you might be aware of AWS. This is one of the cloud services provider. Then we will see how big data and AWS is married together and how AWS can solve big data problems. What are the different suite of applications that AWS has, which will aid us in not only storing the big data, but and also processing that big data in a cost-effective and timely manner, because that is very important. So let's have a look at what big data is first. We will look at the dictionary definition of this term first, and then we will explore some more on this topic. So what is big data? You can consider big data as a high volume, high velocity, and high variety information. So that any data which has these three properties associated with it is your big data. Big data doesn't only mean volume. It also means the variety. It also means the velocity with which the data is created. And this information assets demands a cost-effective, innovative forms of information processing that enable enhanced insight, decision making, and process automation. So this is the um, the 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 technique which helps you dig into this raw data and then get insights from it is nothing but your big data. Now, as I said, this big data is not something which has come from out of the planet. This is the same data that we have been using for years before this. So there are certain properties of this data that makes this data as a big data. We call them as 5 V's of big data. Out of these five, three are very important ones. The very first one is the volume. Okay. So volume is the main issue that we have when we say the data is growing so much, as I've shown you here, the rate at which the data is growing in volume from 2009 to 2020. We are almost towards the end of 2021. So by that date, the IDC had predicted the data to go around 44 trillion gigabytes. That is your 44 zettabytes of data. So when you have data in such volumes, till gigabyte and all, we call it as a normal data. But then when data crosses terabytes and that to, the trillion gigabytes and 44 zettabytes, those kind of numbers, that volume definitely makes that data as a big data. So volume is one of the properties of a data that makes it categorized as a big data. The second property of a data that makes it big data is variety. All of that data that we are seeing with such a tremendous volume is not only in one format. We know the structured data, the data which can fit in the rows and columns of a table is your structured data. Most of our RDBMS systems like Oracle and Teradata, they have a capability of storing this data. But then the moment the data loses its structure slightly, that gets converted to semi-structure. That means some file formats like you have the JSON, XML, CSV, TSV, wherein the data doesn't fit in the rows and columns of a table, but then it is in a structured, what do you call it, tags format. So if you can extract the data from these tags and then convert it to some structure, that data can be stored. So that kind of a data is your semi-structured data. And then the third type of data is your completely unstructured data. That means it doesn't follow any format. Your videos, audios, image files, most of the data that we see nowadays is your unstructured data. So variety is once again is one of the important property that could make your data as a big data. Now the next one is your velocity. Now all of this huge amount of data, all of this variety of data is getting created at a tremendous velocity. As I said, all your IoT devices, your satellites, your CCTV cameras are continuously 24/7, 365 days of the year collecting data, and all of this data is being collected. So that velocity of the data is also one of the challenge, one of the property that makes your data as a big data. So these are the important properties of big data, of any data, which makes it as a big data. And then apart from this, we have the value. We know with all of these challenges, this raw data that we have has a tremendous value to it. The companies who are gathering this data and analyzing this data, they can actually tap into the minds of their customers and which can do wonders for their businesses. And that's why we are seeing Facebooks and Amazons of the world are becoming so big suddenly in these days. So value is one of the properties of the big data, and then the veracity. Now, do not get confused with veracity and velocity. Velocity is the speed at which this data is getting generated. And as this data is getting generated from various sources, all of these sources might be heterogeneous. The way they are collecting the data might be completely different. And that introduce some kind of noise, some kind of inconsistency. So things like null values, outliers, missing values, junk values, those kind of things can occur in your data, and that is nothing but your veracity. So if you talk to any data scientist, you realize that more than 80% of the time, the data scientist spends on analyzing or doing things with the data. 80% of his time is spent on data cleansing or data wrangling using various techniques, so that they have to cleanse this data, get rid of the veracity of the data, and then further process that data and build your machine learning algorithms and stuff like that, right? So these are nothing but the properties of data, any data that makes it as a big data. So now having understood what big data is, now let us try and understand what AWS is. Now many of you might be knowing big data, but then I'm not very sure how many of you actually know AWS. So let's try and understand what AWS is first, and then we will explore what kind of services does AWS provide us. So AWS in simple terms stands for Amazon Web Services. Okay, now this is different from what Amazon is. It is a subsidiary of Amazon, the the e-commerce giant that we all know of. We do our online shoppings on Amazon. So AWS, Amazon Web Services, one of the subsidiary in which they are in the business of renting out the IT infrastructure to the companies and to the people who require it, right? So AWS comprises of many different cloud computing products and services. The highly profitable Amazon division provides servers, storage, networking, remote computing, email, mobile development, along with security. So all of these are the different categories of service, IT services that AWS provides. AWS stands for, again, Amazon Web Services. Furthermore, AWS consists of two main products. When Amazon Web Services started, they started with two main products. One was EC2, that was Amazon's virtual machine service, and the second one was S3, which was the basic storage system. And then they started with these, they humbly started with these two services, and now they have plethora of over hundreds of services which they rent out to different companies. So it is so large and present in the computing world that it is now at least 10 times the size of the nearest competitors. There are various competitors of AWS, that is Google, Google Cloud, and we have Azure, and we have Alibaba and stuff like that. But Amazon is the pioneer in this technology. We call it as cloud computing technology. So they are the beginners, and they are the industry leader. They are almost 10 times larger than all of its competitors put together. That's how large they are. So AWS is split into 12 global regions worldwide, and each of which has multiple availability zones. So now we are not going to get into the details of the infrastructure of AWS, but then AWS is divided into regions all across the globe. Different continents are nothing but the regions of AWS. Within those continents, they have selected certain countries like India, US, Japan, China. Not in China, they don't have any presence in China right now. So then they are located in these countries. They call it as availability zones. So availability zones are the actual data centers, physical data centers of AWS, and whatever we access from our laptops is nothing but the virtualized piece of that infrastructure that is running in their servers across all of these availability zones in physical state. So these services regions are split in order to allow users to set geographical limits on their services, right? So they are set up in all of these availability zones because people from America can access things with less bandwidth, or maybe with less latency if they have something closer to them, right? So they have made it available in different availability zones. So now, having known about AWS and big data, now let's see, why do we need big data in AWS, correct? How are these two things married together to provide us the kind of flexibility, cost effectiveness while we process our big data? So let's have a look at that. Why big data in AWS? Scientists, developers, and other technology enthusiasts from many different domains are taking advantage of AWS to perform big data analytics. Okay, because AWS is known for flexibility and value for money. And then combining those technologies for that cost-effective technologies, we can use those technologies for processing and storage of our big data. So AWS offers you a portfolio of cloud computing services to help manage big data by significantly reducing. So let us move to the next. How AWS can solve big data challenges. So we are basically going to talk about the different categories of AWS solutions that we have. For solving big data challenges, we have the data ingestion. That is, the data, big data needs to get injected in our systems, have to get stored there. Then the data storage, then data pre-processing. Once the data is stored, we talked about cleansing and wrangling of the data. So that's what we do, data pre-processing. Once the data pre-processing happens, after analyzing the data, whatever the output is, we will visualize it using the data visualization tools, because the customers do not understand the raw numbers. They understand only images. So you have to, using the data visualization techniques, you have to actually put these things in front of them, these findings in front of them in the form of pictures. So that's what your data visualization is all about. So we will look at the services of AWS in each one of these categories one by one. So let us talk about data ingestion. Data ingestion is collecting the raw data from transactions, logs, mobile devices, and many more such devices like IoT devices, satellites, and all that. It is the first challenge many organizations face when dealing with the big data. How to get the data ingested in your system, how to acquire that data. A good big data platform makes this step easier. So allowing developers to ingest a wide variety of data, not just one type of the data. It can be streaming data, it can be batch data from structured or unstructured sources at any speed using real time or batch mode. So that's what we are talking about, the data ingestion. Now we will look at the products that the Kinesis and all. Let me just go back on this slide. Okay. And then we will talk about the different products. So when we talk about the data ingestion, that's what we meant. The next category is storage of data. Any big data platform needs a secure, scalable, and durable repository to store data prior to or even after processing that task. So storage is very important of this data. So depending on your specific requirements, you may also need temporary store for the data, or the while the data is in transit. So all of that will be taken care by the data storage category of AWS services for big data. The third category is data processing. AWS has its own data visualization tools also. We will talk about that. And it allows for fast and easy exploration of data sets. But the business people will not understand the raw data or whatever data crunching that you've done. All they understand is visuals, right? So these four categories of big data processing tools are supported by AWS. And now we will talk about the types of products that we have, the products, types of services that we have in each of one of these categories. Okay. So the first one is your data ingestion. So let us talk about the category of data ingestion and what are the tools available here. You can see there are two tools available from Amazon, that is Amazon Kinesis and Amazon Snowball. So Amazon Kinesis Firehouse, also you call it, is a fully managed service for delivering real-time streaming data directly to Amazon S3. Now, Amazon S3 is a storage component. Kinesis is your data ingestion component. You use it to acquire the data and then store it in S3. Kinesis Firehouse automatically scales to match the volume and throughput of streaming data. So if your data increases, it will scale out. Kinesis will scale out. If your data decreases, it will scale down. That will also affect the cost of data ingestion. right? If you have it in premise, then you will have to manually do it. In this case, Amazon takes care of everything. You just have to focus on ingesting your data. Now, you can configure Kinesis Firehouse to transform streaming data before you store it in the Amazon S3. We will talk about Amazon S3 in the storage category. Now, the second product that we have is your Snowball. So Snowball, okay. So as you can see here in the diagram, Snowball looks very similar to a briefcase, and that's what it is actually. So you can use AWS Snowball to securely and efficiently migrate bulk data from on-premise storage platform and Hadoop clusters to S3 bucket. So if you have a huge data to be transferred to S3 bucket on AWS, then after you create a job in AWS Management Console, you automatically get a Snowball appliance. AWS people will send in Snowball appliance. It's a hardware. After a Snowball arrives, connect it to your local network wherever your data is. Install the Snowball client on your premises data source, and then use the Snowball client to select and transfer the file directories that you want to transfer from your in-house data sources to the Amazon S3. So this is kind of a briefcase service which is provided. That's why it is called a Snowball, and Snowball is capable of transferring petabytes and zettabytes of data in one go. So when you have a large data transfer requirement or ingestion requirement, you will use Snowball. So that is your data ingestion category. Once you ingest your data in your Amazon environment using Kinesis or Snowball, then you will be storing that data in storage services. S3 and your Amazon Glue are the two storage services which are provided by Amazon. Let's have a look at this. Amazon S3 is your simple storage service. S3 is one of the earliest services which were introduced by Amazon. So Amazon says S3 is a secure, highly scalable, durable object storage with millisecond latency for data access. You can access data with low latency. S3 can store any type of data from anywhere. It is an object store, right? So you can store anything. It just considers it as a file. So you can store a song, you can store a movie, you can store a picture, file, anything. Websites, and it also stores and retrieve any amount of data with unmatchable availability. So the kind of guarantee, the kind of availability guarantee that AWS gives you is 99.99999 up to 11 nines of durability. So you have a promise from Amazon that whatever data you have stored in S3, it will be 99.9999 up to 11 nines, it will be available to you. That's a guarantee of Amazon, right? So that's all about the S3. The next Amazon storage component that we have is Amazon Glue. Glue is a fully managed service that provides a data catalog to make data in the data lake discoverable. Now you have huge data lakes, S3 data lakes. So you require some kind of a cataloging service. Glue provides you that cataloging service, and using Glue, you can actually search for data quickly in this huge lake of data that you might have in your AWS S3 or S3 bucket, S3 data lakes or something like that. So that is your Amazon Glue. These are the main prominent services that are available. So the next category is your data analytics. Correct. Once you procure the data, once you store the data, now is the time to process the data. So there are various tools available. The Amazon EMR and Redshift are the two tools available for doing this with Amazon. So for big data processing using the Spark and Hadoop, Amazon EMR provides a managed service that makes it easy, fast, and cost effective to process vast amounts of data. So you can imagine EMR as portable Hadoop cluster. Now we know that if you are setting up Hadoop cluster, you will require lots of servers in your in-premise, right, in your data center. And on top of those servers, you will start your Hadoop cluster. Whether you want to process the data or not process the data, that Hadoop cluster will always be on, right, live. You will be storing your data in that. So in that same cluster, you can set up in AWS also. Same thing will happen. But then if you want to further make it flexible and make it more cost effective, then you can store your data in S3 buckets. Okay. Let's say within the 24 hours of the day, you are collecting your data 20 hours, and in the 4-hour nightly window, you are processing that data. So what will happen? You will keep your S3 buckets up and your Hadoop cluster will be on only for that 4 hours of the night, and rest of the times it will be only S3 bucket, no Hadoop cluster. So that flexibility is provided to you by EMR, and that's why it is called Elastic Map Reduce. In Elastic Map Reduce, you can have Map Reduce, Spark, Hive, any Hadoop-based technology that you use to process your data, and that makes the processing of your data very cost effective. Actually, for instead of keeping your Hadoop cluster on for 24/7, you are now keeping it only on for 4/7. And that's the only rent you're paying to AWS. So that becomes very flexible and cost effective. The next is your Redshift for data warehousing. Redshift is your data warehousing product by Amazon. You must have heard of Teradata and those kind of things. So Redshift is actually a competitor of those kind of software, those kind of data warehousing products from Amazon. So Redshift provides the ability to run complex analytic queries against petabytes of structured data. So it is again limited to structured data. It's an RDBMS. So also it includes Redshift Spectrum that runs SQL queries directly against exabytes of data sitting in your S3 bucket. So they have an interface between S3 and Redshift. So you don't even need to load the data in S3 Redshift RDBMS. Whatever data you have kept in your S3, as far as it is structured data, using the Redshift Spectrum interface, you can actually process the data in place in S3 buckets, right? So those kind of facilities and services are available from AWS in the processing category. And then finally, in the big data suite of applications, we have something on the data visualization. After we procure the data, store the data, process the data, now is the time to tell a story to the customer. And how do I tell a story? In terms of dashboards and pre-cooked data visualizations. So data visualization is the last step in the data analytics. And QuickSight is the product which is offered by AWS. So in this category, we have a QuickSight. We have many other products also which are not AWS products, such as Tableau, your Power BI, those kind of things. But then if you're running your entire data analytics pipeline on AWS, then having QuickSight is becomes very natural, right? Because that will be compatible with all of the different applications that you're using on AWS. So for dashboards and visualizations, Amazon QuickSight provides you fast cloud-powered business analytics services. Okay. Again, it makes it easy to build stunning visualizations and rich dashboards and graphs and those kind of things, which business people really like. Additionally, you can access them from any browser or mobile device. And this QuickSight tools, they are web-based. You do not have to install any software on your machine. Correct? So if you're doing Tableau dashboard, you have to have a Tableau desktop installed on your desktop, right? You have to have a Power BI on your systems. But in this case, QuickSight will be managed by Amazon, and you can access your QuickSight dashboards, create them from any web portal. Okay, those kind of things can be done. So that is your entire suite of big data applications that are available on AWS. But Power BI is mostly used. Power BI is mostly used. Tableau was very popular. Now Power BI is getting the popularity. But then, as I said, AWS QuickSight or AWS services, for that matter, in all of these 4 categories are not the only options. You can see everything is moving on to cloud. So that day is not far when you might not see people using Tableau or Power BI. They might see QuickSight being used because of the compatibility. If you have all your components running on AWS, then why would you go for Power BI? You would rather go for a QuickSight. That is an offering from AWS. You might use it, you might not use it. Whatever is popular, it depends on what is the trend as of now in the market. It might not take, it might change overnight. But then lots of clients I know, they're using QuickSight also. So that brings us to the end of this topic today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day ahead. Bye-bye.